after high school, the big question was, what are we going to do? And I was torn between, I wanted to be an artist, painter, and the other interest I had was nuclear physics. So, um, as good advice from my housemaster, he said, child, why don't you combine the two? And I had never thought about architecture till then. And my father also suggested the same thing. Habib Fidali was a year senior to me, and he had gone to the Architectural Association. That's the only institution I knew, so that's where I went. Dr. Königsberger had set up the Department of Tropical Architecture, and I, like other people from the third world, um, we took that option in the final year where you could combine and take part in the tropical. So we did that. Basically, it's about thermal comfort, um, and so microclimate and climate control, all of these things. This should be a normal part of any architecture student. When you're talking about tropical, you're talking about underdevelopment, and so the economics of development, all of that comes into the discussion naturally. And so as students, we became, of course, more and more educated about colonialism, post-colonialism, and the whole politics of development and so on. The whole idea was how we can get back to our countries and contribute to the process of development. And then I got a letter from Lahore, Shakir Ali, through my friend Ijazul Hasan, saying that they would like me to come to Lahore, take up the architecture department. The National College of Art was making that transition from the Mayo School, which was focused on hands-on practical craft, but it had started a regular professional 5-year course in architecture when it became a college, a national college, and seminars, sometimes in West Pakistan, sometimes in East Pakistan, and meeting with each other at that level. It was a very close connection in that sense. Setting up the institute, the Institute of Architects, Mazharul Islam was played a leading role. There were very few, there were just a handful of architects at that time anyway. But with the new crop of students coming in, there was a lot of interchange. From 66 to 77, I was head of architecture department. And then I had set up a firm with an old school friend, Fawad Ali Butt. So I took long leave from the college to devote to the master planning project and became more involved in the practical side. So in other words, whereas the Doxiadis plan was a typical modernist idea of endless evolution, progress, development forever, the current Lahore plan is based on normative principles. What is a city? Normative. It's not infinite growth. So sustainability, normality, humanity, equity, these were the kind of principles, very different from the Doxiadis plan. And after the mid-60s is when modernism starts to be questioned. There's a whole critique of modernism. I was rejecting the modernist paradigm totally, from the base upwards. And that is the philosophical basis. Well, I tried to learn how did pre-modern cultures, what was art about? What was architecture about? It was, and continues to be, a means of communication. And then when you get into it, you've discovered that all traditional art and architecture, whether it's philosophy, drama, theater, music, dance, it is all about transmitting that metaphysical truth, packing it in a physical package so that I can hand it over to you. Then you decode it and receive that information. It's amazing. It's a miracle. Modernism had taught us, oh, the only reality is the physical, and the only life we have is this life. So whatever you can get is how much you can learn about the physical world, manipulate it, conquer it. The whole attitude of modern man, of conquering nature, to dominate and to exploit and to extract as much as you can, because that's all the chance you'll have. Traditional cultures tell us a very different story about who we are, what we are here for, what we should be doing.
Myself personally, I've been trying to navigate between the monster of high tech and the vernacular. So that was a very difficult thing to do. And the success in trying to do that has not been, I can't say that it was easy. So it's like a job of a sailor who's confronting high tide and low tide all the time. Actually, I joined fine arts in the beginning. So I was advised and I moved from fine arts to architecture. And my teacher, Shakir Ali, was very upset with me because my drawing was very good. The formation of National College of Arts, I was in the first batch, was a revolution of a kind and a tremendous concept of how a creative college of arts should perform. And he did produce some very valuable stuff from that college. And the concept was very clear. It carried the rationale of modern movement, all the plus points of modern movements, because I'm a great admirer of that movement of 60s, because it produced architecture which carried a lot of sense of purpose and a sense of, it was reflecting the age of reason. And architecture was not just an aesthetic endeavor of creating adventure or good forms alone. Architecture was full of its context of purpose, now later developed further into a factor of ecology now. First project, when I was still, I think in the last year, I was given the auditorium in College of Arts, with the influence of modern teaching is reflected in that. It's a shutterboard, raw concrete building. In those days, it was much ahead of time. It was the training that I learned from my professors that resulted in that sort of an expression. But later on, I drifted from there. This was an influence of my cultural circle, maybe, that in the race of progress, we are following West, which is very good in a way, but we are losing our connection with our roots. and our architecture has no sense of place. So then I drifted along and made projects like Alhambra, which are not direct expression of modernism, but I still maintain the contemporary spirit of architecture, because by following traditions, you can't lose the sensibility of materials available and technology available. So it becomes to navigate between the past and the present and looking into future as well. Yes, for Alhambra, so I said if they can do it in brick, why can't we do it now in brick? But at the same time, I said I did. My teachers told me, imitation, no, no imitation. You can emulate the spirit of architecture in building. Most of the buildings are related with sound and vision. So for sound, for acoustics, rectangular buildings are no good, they reverberate. So we made polygonal buildings where sound got diffused by non-parallel. So it was a rational travel of solving problems which I had recently learned from my school. And we asserted on the importance of open spaces. They are as important as the buildings themselves. So in case of Alhambra, the very popular spaces are courtyards in between, but they are not usual rectangular courtyards. They are created by the negative spaces between the buildings. But what is important is the spirit of Islamic architecture. So if we have to use Islamic architecture, then we should go for the spirit, which is quite remarkable, which is, you know, the sense of openness, the use of light and air, use of water, use of gardens around buildings. If you pick up useful things like that, that's very nice. But if you stick domes and minarets and mushrabiyas, then it becomes cut and paste. And there are very few projects which capture the spirit of Islamic architecture. And I believe that pluralist is the only manner in which we can deal with things these days. If we become dogmatic or we become traditionalist or we become a modernist, you can't, only somebody like Gary can get away with it. But in general practice, it's not the right thing to do. To be I call them extremists. You can't be an extremist in that manner. But now we are facing a very complex sort of a situation where architects have to just not deliver pragmatics of functionality, but they have also to see that how they are contributing in the human existence of today in terms of urbanity and in terms of the expansion of human settlements.
Well, I graduated from Oxford School of Architecture, which has now become Oxford Brookes University. And by that time, I'd got married. My husband was at Oxford. He was studying modern greats. And so we both finished off. And by that time, we had a daughter as well. And we all came back to Pakistan. Because I think at that time, there was a huge amount of zeal about the new country. Pakistan had been liberated in 1947. And we grew up with the thought that whatever we did was for our own new country. And so I think at that time there was no question or no thought of staying anywhere else. I think for a young architect, it's always difficult. I don't think it mattered whether you're a male or a female. And certainly on the sites, I had issues, and I've often mentioned it, that I was tested, and I was tested until very, very late in my profession, in my career, when they would see whether I was able to walk up a really very shaky ladder up to the top floor, and whether I could pass this test. But I think I earned it. And also another interesting thought, I think, that a lot of people perhaps don't think about is that as a woman, I really had a lot of advantages. Because first of all, people are very courteous to you. At least at that time, they were all very, very courteous. And they don't know how to really handle you, so they will be very polite. And also, some of us, or many of us at that time, really came with very privileged backgrounds. So we had a whole, there's a whole network of people who were supportive. Otherwise, I think compared to many female architects in the global north, I think some of us had a much easier time. I think to break the glass ceiling in other countries, in Western countries, is far more difficult than it is here. Also, you must remember that Pakistan had a great tradition of women, of very strong women who had been fighting for independence. They were the ones who really brought in the tradition that we were really, we thought there was somebody that we could, the role models were there. And I think that helped a lot. The 80s became really troublesome in many ways. I think we started to lose a lot of our historic structures at that time. Prosperity had set into Pakistan. I think there was a lot of flow of people going from here to Middle East. The markets had opened up there and so on. And so I think that was in some way very destructive for our heritage buildings. And that's the time when my husband set up Heritage Foundation. We started to document as much as possible because we felt we were losing too much. But also I think there was an urge to also, I think, understand about oneself. Because at least I can speak for myself that I had not been brought up where I could have learned about my own heritage or my own culture. I don't think I knew enough about myself. So when we got back from Oxford, both my husband and myself, that was the time that we were able to go around a lot, old cities and looking at how things were and so on and so forth. And that was what I call my relearning experience. But that was the time in the early 70s when I got the chance to design the Anguri Bagh housing. And it was for the first time I confronted or I really made contact with people of a different class, which I had not thought about, not known about. And I think that was a very sobering and a very kind of very important learning experience for me. And the interesting thing about that was that, because I was a woman, again, when we're talking of disadvantage of women, I think I had a lot of advantage because of my being a woman. I was able to go and talk to all the women there. I was able to understand their issues and problems. And I think I designed with tradition in my mind, because Lahore city, it was in the Lahore city. And I walked the streets of Lahore for the first time in my life, if you like. So I knew. And I'd been very much impressed by how things were there. And there was this socialist minister called Mubashir Hasan. And Mubashir decided to have a meeting of the general public in the Shalimar Bagh, the beautiful 17th century Shah Jahan's great creation, right? So we were all there and I was asked to present my case. And I presented my drawings, and then the women said, well, show us where our chickens will go. So maybe for a male architect it would be superfluous, I don't know. But for me it was a very important question. And so I was able to tell them, look, these are the terraces. Every unit, there are only 2-room apartments, right? But everyone had a terrace, either a courtyard or a terrace at even the 3rd floor. And I said, you will be able to have your chickens there. You will be able to look after your children and also grow vegetables. So then it was approved. My design was approved because of that. I was among the first group that Aga Khan invited at Lemonier. And I think, was it in 1976? I can't remember. I probably was the youngest one to be invited. And of course, there were giants there that time. And also, above all, there was Hasan Bey there, Hasan Fatahi. The first time I met him. Afterwards, he called me his daughter. I mean, it was just amazing. He's just incredible, incredible. It was a time when we started to discuss about what is Islamic architecture. And I've always been against this kind of, I called it the instant Islamic. in many ways, because you apply imagery on something that it doesn't have the soul of what you call, I would call it Muslim architecture of Muslims. So even Islamic architecture seemed like an anomaly. I mean, do you call building the West Christian architecture? And then if you impose that imagery that may not have relevance today, I don't know, I can't relate to that. So for me, I think I would rather go in for more kind of regional kind of architecture, more kind of local expression of what things have to be, rather than giving a big label of Islamic. Yeah, I don't believe in that. But to me, in my country, for instance, everything had been very low key always. And so I would rather go that direction than to the direction of the powerful people, where I think that it's done more for one's own ego rather than for the good of the people.
First, I went for 3 months at the Government School of Architecture in Karachi. After that, I was sent off to what was then the Oxford Polytechnic. So I went there. I studied there for 2 years first. Then I was a bad student, so they sent me off for 1 year to work in architects' offices. And I went to Paris. I met Michel Shah. He showed me the drawings of the University of Karachi. I already loved those buildings that he had designed and that had already been built. In my opinion, it's the best modernist architecture that the country has. Doxiadis did not understand sociology. He created 2 satellite cities, one in Landikorangi and the other in New Karachi. He shifted the refugees out of the city because they were living in so-called slums and shifted them to these 2 cities. The idea was that industry would develop there and these people would work there, but the industry didn't develop until now. So these refugees had to come all the way from there to the city work areas. That was the beginning of Karachi's transport problems. Secondly, the refugees were mostly working class who were shifted there, and they were all Urdu speaking. So you created working class populations which were of the same ethnicity. These 2 areas, Landikorangi and New Karachi, became the centers of a people who considered themselves to be marginalized. So I think Doxiadis' plan failure was on that count. By creating this immense need for transport, not only that, it also destroyed the heritage. The central area of the city became completely crowded with buses. The other problem Doxiadis' plan was, and this was serious, we were supposed to build 40,000 houses in the first place, and altogether we were supposed to build 200,000 houses. We only built 10,000 houses. After coming back to Karachi, I traveled a lot in Pakistan. 3 incidents happened. One was I had grown up in a military cantonment that had been given to government and semi-government officials. And in between those barracks, there were refugee families. And then one day, my friends from the settlement came and said that we have received a notice of eviction in the next 3 days. So can you do something about it? I was the architect at that time to a very important police official. Can you help them out? Can I help them out? And he said to me, no, you are wrong. These people are thieves. Their women have bad character. They'll only dirty the town. So they have to go from where they are. The second incident was I used to go and sit in a tea house opposite Dow Medical College, and friends used to come there. And one day, the secretary of the Karachi Grocers Association was there, and he said the Karachi Municipal Council has driven us crazy. We have very small shops. They don't allow us to put our things on the pavement. So how can we carry on businesses? So I told him, let's look at it. So we went and looked at it. And we saw that we could make that street pedestrian without stopping vehicular traffic. So we made a plan for them and gave it to them. And to this day, it is pedestrian. Third incident was with the boatmen. One day I received a telegram, in those days we had telegrams, which simply said, please help, come. So I went there and I saw that under the Sakhar master plan, they were removing that whole settlement of boatmen and taking them onto the other side of the river where there were no fish because the current was too fast. So we made an application to the member of National Assembly of Sakhar. We made a plan of where they could be placed and gave it to them and told them, go and see your MNA. So I was summoned. And the first thing I was told is, why are you spoiling these people? Luckily, his son was there at that meeting. And his son said to him, Baba, this is a great crime that is being committed, and you are saying, why are you spoiling these people? I don't know what transpired between father and son, but that settlement did not move. It stayed. So all this changed many things in my mind, and that is when I started writing. I had not been trained to work with communities. I had not been trained on land issues, nothing. But I started to try and understand them. And my thinking about architecture, etc., started to change. But at that time, all architects here were modernists. And that modernist expression found its way to the architecture of the state as well. I was modernistic, yes. I still am. So modernism is okay. Something you know, something you can sketch easily, something that has a philosophy about what a human being is, what a state is, what a community is, what governance is. All that is present in modernism.